think we're streaming now.
There we go. Yes, welcome everybody to our weekly backdrop outreach meeting. I was just waiting for the actual stream to start so I could pause it. If somebody could share the link to the stream in Zulip, that would be good for those who are watching. Anyways, this is our every other week outreach meeting. We are streaming live on YouTube, so if you prefer to keep your camera off, go ahead, but we like to see your faces. We're going to start out with a round of introductions, and the way we usually do that is just a short who you are, where you are, and anything short you'd like to share. And then when you're done, call on someone else to go next. I'm going to go ahead and start. My name is Tim Erickson. I'm in Deerwood, Minnesota right now, and I have been the same sort of update I've been giving for the last few weeks, which has been I feel really busy and overwhelmed sort of at the moment. So my presence around backdrop has been a little lighter than usual, but I think that my schedule's clearing up a bit, and I have some things I want to finish or get back on. So hopefully you'll be seeing more of me other than at these weekly meetings. And the other big update, I often give our wildlife updates, and I'm excited today because we had a black bear in the front yard yesterday, which is unusual. So we've got a fox that comes every day. That's getting boring now. I used to be excited about that. Anyways, Robert, do you want to go next?
I'm Robert Lang from Altadena, California, bug folder on the internet. I guess like Tim, I like to look out, see wildlife out this direction. There's nothing there right now, so I'll pass it over to Greg.
Hi, Greg. Usually in Australia, but now stuck in Greece until July 2nd. Hopefully we make it back. I haven't joined the weekly meetings in like 2 or 3 weeks now, so I would like to catch up with everything and help however I can. Excited about the release, which is to happen on the 15th. And I'll pass it on to Sarvashri.
My name is Sarvashri, and I'm working on the Ultimate Beginner's Guide to Backdrop, the project I'm working on. And Tim will talk about the video that we're working on. So let me, a little bit later, I'll pass it on to Jen.
Hi, I'm Jen Lampton, joining from Oakland, California. I have a terrible headache today, so I'm trying to hide in the dark, but looking forward to outreachy things. Let's see, Luke.
All right. I'm Luke McCormick. I'm in San Ramon, California. I try to help with various sort of marketing things. I'm horribly oversubscribed all the time, so I try to make fewer promises but I end up making them anyway. And let me throw it off to Pono.
Hey, I'm Pono. I work at the Software Freedom Conservancy. I'm up in Oregon, and my wildlife update is that the camas is blooming, and so I'm really excited to go harvest some this weekend. And then,
what is camas?
It's a bulb that was eaten by the Kalapuya people, and so that's the land that I'm on right now.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I haven't harvested it myself before, so I'm excited to see. I don't poison myself, so if I don't make it to the next meeting, you'll know that was my experiment gone wrong. But yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us. So, yeah, I think we got a lot to talk about. I have been the last couple outreach meetings sharing my Miro board. I think I'm going to skip that today because we have a bunch of other things to talk about. Well, I got it open in front of me, but let's move on to sort of just the general things to do. We want to talk about the newsletter. I think we should talk a little bit about what Sarvashri and I started working on this week. And we need to talk about Backdrop Live, are the two big things. Is there anything else that people, outreach stuff that people specifically want to talk about today? Okay.
I would like to talk about differentiation, how we can differentiate Backdrop from other CMSs that make it clear, what the options are and why they might want to use Backdrop. I think that would help a lot with outreach.
Okay. Gonna make a note. Something, oh, I see. I somehow got logged out of Google. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Let's start. Let's go ahead and start out talking about. Well, first of all, if I were showing my mural board, I'd be looking for social media or blog post ideas, anything that we can socialize in terms of outreach. Does anybody have anything new that we can add to that list? I am. What did I? Go ahead.
Is the release happening on the 15th, which is Saturday, or are we gonna release like Monday to allow for the weekend to do any work?
We should ask Nate at the next meeting.
I certainly don't have an answer.
Yeah, so depending on that, we're going to tweet about the release anyways, right? So
sure. That is certainly a good point, and that will be on our list. Jen, we were talking about the t-shirts and sweatshirts came up. I think in the past I tend not to tweet about them because I think we've decided that we're really not pushing them. Is that still the case? Do we have
we don't make a lot of money off of them. They're most valuable as a promotional tool. So like if there is an in-person event, it makes sense to have people wearing them there because then other people will see them and go, what's Backdrop? But I feel like in this like online world, it's like not as valuable for us. But yeah, I mean, if every now and then you want to mention them, I think that's fine. But it's not important to push.
I was overconfident with ordering mine last time. I got a large size and now my wife is wearing it. She asked for another one and I need an extra large for me. So
well, what we probably should be tweeting about on a regular basis is donations and how to donate to Backdrop. Pono, if you have ideas about what things we could, SFC related, that we could be sharing in our social media, let us know. Anyways, so I actually think I'm not short of ideas. I've been more short of time lately on that. So
with regards to the donations, can I ask, do we want to be transparent about, like, first of all, we're asking for donations, but where are we spending that money? Or if we are making a campaign about donations, should we make it clear that we're sort of like gathering money for regular, costs like servers and stuff like that, or if we actually actively want to do something like a promotional campaign or things like that?
My gut reaction to that is that is something I think we need to be talking about with the PMC. One of the reasons I am a little hesitant to ask for donations, or not hesitant to ask for donations, I'm hesitant to sort of push for them.
Exactly.
Is that we're not, it's like we don't have a real clear why are we raising them? How are we spending the money? So I think I'd feel better about those things, but I kind of feel like that's something maybe the PMC needs to talk about.
Okay, fair enough.
So, I mean, for those that are watching this, we do have certain monthly expenses, right? Our Linode, a few things like that. And primarily those have been our major expenses. We don't have many others, although we did, for example, just have a PMC member attend a training session on code of conduct stuff. And that would be another place where we would spend these kinds of funds, but we need to do a better job of communicating that. And that's actually a good blog post or something we might want to socialize. What I'd like to do is move on to the newsletter and talk briefly about that because at our meeting 2 weeks ago, we actually had a run of 2 or 3 months. After a very erratic history in terms of getting our newsletter out. Peter did a great job of getting it out for 2 or 3 months in a row. This month, I volunteered to do that and have been slow on that. So we're already, we usually try to get it out right at the end of the month or right at the beginning, and it's already the 13th. 2 weeks ago, Peter was a little bit concerned about content, like if we had enough content. Since then, I think I have plenty of ideas about content. I just have to pull it together. However, we do like to do a newsletter on the, well, I think in the past, the idea, Jen, hasn't it been to do it 2 weeks after a release?
Yeah, that way we're sure the release is pushed to Pantheon with any bug fixes before we tell people about it.
So I guess if I had the option or were able to get a newsletter ready by, say, Monday, would it be worth sending it? Or at this stage, should we wait until, is there any reason to wait until?
I would say the reason for sending it earlier is so that we can promote Backdrop Live sooner, so that people would get that on their schedule. But yeah, I think there's no harm in doing it twice, and we could even make sure we did it, now, and then 2 or even 3 weeks after the release would be fine too, if we thought that 2 weeks after was too close.
If we sent it out on Monday, in theory, the release would be out. Do we want to mention it, or do we want to hold off until?
I think we should hold off, because a lot of people might try to go to Pantheon to try it and they wouldn't get it, and it would be frustrating.
Okay. Okay. So
there's another release after the release that just happened not long ago.
The release, we just did a sort of a test release around the 1st of the month. That was our code freeze or our feature freeze. And that, yeah, and what happens with Sarvashri, what happens with the feature freeze is we put everything that's going to be in the final release has to be frozen and in the code base, and then we do a preview release that people can test. But this is kind of like a beta test of the new release. And so basically we wait 2 weeks where we can still refine the final issues, and also people can report any bugs with the beta release or with the preview release. And then the official release is the 15th of the month or about. So we didn't do an official release 2 weeks ago. We did a preview.
Well, it came 18.3 came up as a release for me.
Well,
Yeah,
we're talking about minor releases. So we're talking about the releases that happen 3 times a year. So we have a release 15th of January, then 15th of May, and 15th of September. Just before we do those releases, 2 weeks before they happen, we do a pre-release to give people enough time to test it, and so that we can polish things before they go out.
So 18.3 was a bug fix release and a security release. So every 4 months we do a minor release which has new features in it. But in between those we do bug fix and security releases. So what you're thinking of 18.3 is that was just a bug fix and a security release.
Okay.
There were no new features in that.
Okay.
Okay. So this weekend, on or about the 15th, we will be having a new minor release with new features. Okay.
So the new features will be part of a newsletter release, I presume.
Well, they will, but what we're going to wait until the newsletter after that, because before we sort of really promote the new release, we like to give a little bit of time to make sure everything's been updated, and also sometimes we discover bugs after a release, and sometimes within 2 weeks we've done a bug fix to fix any bugs, and it's sometimes better to kind of wait before you do your big official announcement until after people have tried it out.
All that makes sense. I understand how the releases work. So bug fixes, security releases can happen anytime.
Yes, exactly. They can happen anytime, and that's what 18.3 was. Okay.
Great.
Well, let's. I think we should move on and talk about the Backdrop Live, because this is coming up. We've, I think, firmly determined now that it's in July. I'm going to double check the date, if it was the 10th or the 11th. We've got it, the 9th through the 10th is what we have listed on the website. So this will be our third Backdrop Live. We've been talking about it. We talked a little bit about it at our last meeting. I believe one of the things we were talking about was the schedule and the timing.
I have it listed for Friday, March 12th as the starting point.
Well, that was the last one, March 12th.
On March 12th. And then this next one was also a Friday, Saturday, July 9th.
9th, yeah, through the 10th. Well, but of course that depends on what your time zone is.
Yeah, okay. 9th and 10th. Okay, good.
And there's, we talked about spending a little bit of time at all of our outreach meetings planning this. One of the things we do have a GitHub issue open where we're talking a little bit about the various tasks and sort of setting up a template for what we need to do for this and for future Backdrop Lives. I think the biggest thing, though, is we started this discussion about the exact schedule last time, and we didn't make final decisions. We got the dates, but like when we want to start and when we want to stop. I think, Jen, you had requested that I share my spreadsheet. Let me look.
How does everybody feel with regards to how the schedule was last time? Did it work nicely for us?
It worked well, and people in the States, I think, worked well for me on the East Coast.
As someone on the West Coast, I felt that the 6 and 7 a.m. sessions were a little too early.
So, yeah, I mean, we had sort of overall it was okay, but there were some nuances like that, like the starting time. The problem, of course, is no matter when we started, it's early for some people.
Yeah.
One of the things in the US where most of our participants were, we had like one block of sessions on Saturday morning, and that one only had like 2 sessions in it. So I think that didn't work out very well. And one of the things we talked about is we really want to have some like Saturday content. So having just sort of one block in the morning doesn't work real well. But of course, the problem is if we're trying to accommodate this international schedule is
with the thinking being that people prefer to sleep in on Saturdays. Is that it?
Well, I think the thinking has been that some people prefer weekends and some people prefer weekends, and that if we're going to overlap, it'd be nice to accommodate both groups. But if like I think Luke is specifically, I think you mentioned that in our last meeting, Luke, was that you were looking forward to participating on Saturday, but then there was hardly any content on Saturday. But I just don't know. The problem is, of course, settling on some alternative. We have had, well, I think in the last one, we actually went a little bit more than 24 hours. And Peter pointed out that meant that there were sort of more sessions in the prime time for people in the US, and people in sort of Asia and Australia had fewer sessions in prime time for them. And, if we were to try and be equal, it would be exactly 24 hours. But I think one of the reasons we did that extra thing at the end was we didn't want the end of Backdrop Live to happen in the middle of the night in the US, because then, 2/3 of the participants were from the US. So that would mean that Backdrop Live was sort of ending at a time with very little participation in the US.
Would it help instead of going 24 hours? Would it help being 48? And we have a Friday and a Saturday, so we accommodate work days and weekends for those that.
Our first Backdrop Live went 48 hours, and we decided after that maybe if we did 3 of them a year, that maybe only one of them was 48. and the other 2 were 24. But there's nothing written in stone about that. We can.
I
Yeah,
don't think we should. I don't think we should be tied down to multiples of 24.
Yeah. Well, my point being that it's not going to be a continuous 48 hours. It's just the same number of sessions, but just spread a little bit differently. So, over a period of 48 hours.
For Pono's sake and anybody else who wasn't involved, this is a rough schedule for last time, I think. And basically, what we have been trying to do with our Backdrop Live is to accommodate a global schedule, is to kind of go on a 3-hour block. So 3 hours on, 3 hours off, 3 hours on throughout the night. And we have had, actually, this might be this is Backdrop Live 1, I'm sorry. So this one it started on Thursday night. We started it on Thursday evening in San Francisco and ended on Saturday afternoon in San Francisco. Last time, Backdrop 2, we started on Friday morning, and then we went through Saturday morning, and we did go a little bit more than 24 hours. In order, we didn't tie ourselves to that exactly. But then we got at least some feedback that, that if we don't, that we're skewing that, if we're looking for a global audience and we skew it towards more participation in the US, that counters that argument a little bit. Anyways.
I kind of like the schedule we did last time, with the exception of that I would almost want to continue one more 3-hour block into Saturday, so that anyone is there Saturday morning, gets invested, and then can stay a little longer than being like, oh, it's 9 a.m. and I'm done. At least here in California, done at 9 a.m. But yeah, I thought starting early Friday morning was fine. It being, I think it was, wasn't it 6, 7, 8? I don't remember. Maybe it was 7, 8, 9. Yeah, I don't remember.
No, I'm looking to see. These are I must have it in my other Google account. This Google account has just has the 2 Backdrop, the first one.
Yeah.
Oh no, this is it, isn't it? Here it is. This was the last Backdrop. So we started on the East Coast, we started at 6 a.m. on Friday, and we ended at 9 a.m. at the West Coast on Friday.
Yeah.
Did we have a session though at 6 a.m.?
No, we didn't, because we had a couple of gaps in the schedule. So we decided to leave the 6 a.m. ones off.
Okay,
Yes, we did. We actually didn't get anything signed up. And as you can see, we really only had 2 sessions on Saturday morning in the US.
Yep.
So yes, adding another time slot or block on Saturday is a possibility.
What was the most
or even just,
I'm sorry, what was the most popular event? And could we do that twice? Could we have the same event repeated on Saturday? Maybe
Well,
one.
I was kind of thinking the same. Not for every event, but the ones that are more popular or more in demand, I guess.
We have nothing against repeating content, especially because we have sessions in the middle of the night, for different time zones. So we would love to repeat content. I think the time slots that are the busiest because of when they are and less about the content. For example, I think this was the most popular time slot, probably basically from noon to 3 p.m. West Coast time. It's certainly the time slot we had the most sessions, because that was the time that most people were available. So yeah, Sarashri, there's nothing wrong. We can duplicate content. We're in favor of doing that. It's not so much. The thing was that our session is scheduled by people nominating what do they want to talk about and getting it on the schedule. So it's very much determined on who we have to speak. And so if we're going to offer it twice, we just have to find somebody willing to do the same topic twice, or two different people to do the same topic.
That getting started with Backdrop was popular,
Mhm.
and it happened at what time of day?
At noon on the West Coast, which is probably,
West Coast. So what about people overseas? Were they in a bad time for them?
well, this was probably the best time around the time zone. I mean, because it was feasible in Europe, but it wasn't very good in Asia and in Australia. We talked about doing that session twice, but we just never got anybody to volunteer to do it. Because if we're going to do that in the middle of the night, we need somebody from Europe that's willing to do it, that's going to be up at 3 a.m. So that was the problem in terms of doing it twice.
Okay, so
So-
that might be a focus for this live event, is to find some presenters earlier.
Well, not necessarily presenters, but facilitators. It's more of a discussion based. So yeah.
Yeah. No,
Is there something I'm missing? Is there which is the group that would greatly prefer the last session slot over 3 hours later? Because for us West Coast people, 6 to 9 a.m. is a super awkward time to end things, whereas 9 a.m. to noon would be fine.
Sure.
Would be like a nice Saturday morning. So I'm just kind of curious, who would be against that? Like what are the?
No, nobody. I think we just talked about that, doing that this time. That's certainly an option.
Yeah.
Okay.
The argument, though, and I suspect somebody will raise it, is then what we're doing is we are overloading the schedule with time slots that are good in California and underloading it with time slots that are good in Australia. But
Look,
I don't know if we can avoid that.
We can tell people that, look, if for certain sessions, but not for all of them, it would be as if we're duplicating the same day, like that one day twice. But we can say, if you miss that session, it's happening again 8 hours from now, which I think is sort of like going to cover other time zones or things like that. Or call for people if you want to repeat that. And if you missed it, we're happy, so long as we have someone to accommodate it,
Right.
to repeat it.
I mean, 6 a.m. for the West Coast is, according to this, 1 a.m. for Australia. That doesn't seem very good either.
Well, how we got to that being the last session is that we set out with 24-hour schedule, and we decided we wanted to start it at 6 a.m. because we wanted to get 2 blocks of time, because you got 6 a.m. on the West Coast is already 9 a.m. on the East Coast.
Yeah.
So we very deliberately thought that through and decided, well, we want to start early enough that we can get 2 big blocks of time in the US. And then if we end at 24 hours, we're ending at 2 a.m. On the Pacific time. And that seemed like an even more awkward time to end the session. So we added 1 more block to make it less awkward. And now what you're saying is it's still awkward, so we should add 1 more block.
No, I'm just saying, just move that last block 3 hours, and I think we're all good.
The problem with breaking the three on, 3 off pattern is that then it gets really hard for people to remember which block doesn't follow the rest of the schedule.
Maybe in the middle of the night, we should have a 6-hour break.
But it's always the middle of the night somewhere.
Yes. I was about to say that. The middle of the night for whom? Yeah.
We did do that in our first Backdrop Live. We had 1 6-hour break, I think, or actually it's a 9-hour break because it's 3 off. Then we break. We didn't do the 3 on, and then we did another 3 off. I mean, if we're going to continue with this international overnight schedule, we do have to work really hard to get more content because it doesn't make any sense for us to spend all this time, coming up with a schedule that works 24 hours a day and then not have any content in the Australian time zones. So I'm not against just adding another block. So, basically it would be 10, or it would start at 9. No, it would be like at noon, wouldn't it? Well, it would be the same as this, but the next day. So 12, 1, and 2 o'clock.
Yep.
But we have to acknowledge then again that we are skewing towards US participants. But I just think that that's fair.
We could repeat the same schedule both days and have the same content on both days, pretty much, if there are people who want it for
Exactly.
Asia.
Yeah, I was thinking the same. Provided that
Yeah.
there's people that's in demand, we can repeat things. And instead of doing it after 24 hours, which would be the same people, the same time zones, we can do it, repeat the same session after 12 hours or after 8 hours, which would be a different time zone or a different continent, I would say.
Well, what I'm hearing some agreement that we should add an additional block on our regular 3 hours off schedule.
Yes.
We are almost at 48 hours then. Well, no, we're not. We're at about a day and a half. So, but I don't object to that. That's fine.
Look, if it is the last slot doesn't have to have a gap between it. So the last two slots can be back to back, meaning.
Well, I suggested that last time and there was some objection to that. So, Jen, I don't know how you feel about that. Like just having, we could just have this be a longer block or something.
Yeah, at the end.
We've had some arguments that we should stick to the 3 hours on off, just for predictability.
Yeah. I think it's easy for people to plan around if it's consistent. And if it's not, like you're like, oh, well, that's okay, I'll have a 3 hour break, I'm going to move this meeting to this time. And then you show up and it's like, oh, oops, there's sessions right now because this time block doesn't match the other. It just makes it much harder to plan.
Okay.
When it doesn't follow the pattern. And especially, I mean, maybe it's not as important on a Saturday, but especially because we're overlapping with a work day on Friday, I think we're going to get a bunch of people who are trying to work in those off hours so that they don't have to take the day off work. So getting the pattern repeatables.
I don't know about anybody else, but I couldn't work between those breaks. I had to take a break, and sometimes it was eating food, sometimes it was just relaxing my brain. Yeah. So there was no working. I had planned on it, but it just didn't happen.
Yeah, I actually took some sick leave and just participated as much as I could.
I also have some numbers on who attended which session, so I can tell you which ones were.
Yeah, that would be useful.
We have the numbers in the first column of the spreadsheet that Tim is sharing.
Ah, yes, there they are. I thought I'd added them there somewhere. I didn't remember where.
Yeah, but there's one. So we just have total. We don't have individual sessions.
I've got the individual sessions. I might have only put the totals there.
Okay. I hadn't even particularly noticed those. So the welcome session got the most participation. And then, the best block certainly would have been this first block.
CVCRM was pretty high up too. I think there was like 15 there.
Okay. Well, there's no perfect answer to this. What I'm hearing right now is to keep this schedule. I mean, we could shift everything an hour if anybody thinks that helps, but I'm not convinced it does.
I'm convinced that helps, but I'm in Pacific time zone. So another thing to think about too is like we're trying to make the times geographically, like distributed fairly geographically, but that might not map to our attendees. And I know that we're trying to make it map to our attendees, but if we're thinking about like, okay, if the majority of our attendees happen to be in Pacific time zone, I don't actually think they are. But if they were, what we're doing is we're putting the most burden on the majority of our people. I don't know if that is valuable to think of things that way or not, but that's what I was thinking. So I just said it out loud.
Right. No, it's fair. I think there's about as many participants, or in the first one, I have no idea in the second one. In the first one, based on registration, we had, I think the most popular time zone might have been the Pacific, and then sort of Eastern Central was about the same. And so with the current schedule, starting at 6 a.m. Pacific and 9 a.m. East, we have then the last session of this middle is at 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. And so if we bump this all back, our East Coast participants are now bumped to 6 p.m. There's nothing magically bad about that, but
That's all right. That's not a problem.
I mean, we didn't get anybody at 6 a.m. either day, so for presenters. So maybe that's a good argument to bump it an hour.
Yep.
Yeah, I think dropping the 6 a.m. is a good idea. 6 a.m.
Yeah, I think my preference would be to push the whole thing 1 hour and try it like that. And if we want to add an extra block on Saturday, I'm also open to trying that. And we can see afterwards if we need to adjust it again for the next time.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're experimenting, so whatever works best. I think let's try for this one to push everything 1 hour ahead.
Okay. Let's make those two changes. We're going to bump it 1 hour, start 1 hour later. We're going to stick with the 3 hours, 3 hours on, 3 hours off, and add one block on Saturday. And I will make up a spreadsheet that I can share with folks reflecting that. I think the key, though, we can dink around with the schedule all we want. And for this schedule to work, we really need to get sessions in some of these, especially international time slots.
Yeah.
So that needs, in my view, that's sort of the priority for this particular upcoming Backdrop Live, is to make that, to get better participation in Europe and Asia if possible, or certainly, I don't care where they're from, but just so that they're using these late night time slots.
Now that we have a time schedule, we can promote that we want to get presenters right away in the next newsletter.
Yes. We can. What am I thinking? I'm thinking that we don't need to talk about this too much, but MidCamp this year did a total unconference like we did. They only did it during the day. It was a single day, or it was more than 1 day, but it was in the U.S. time zones. We've experimented with this, but they had a way for people to submit topics on the website that was a little different than ours. And I want to go back and look at how they did it and see if that, but.
Do they do sprints during those events? And do we want to keep the live as a discussion only, or do we want to do either code sprints or documentation sprints, whatever?
Normal Drupal camps frequently have sprints going on. I don't know if I've seen any really successful virtual camps that have included sprints, although I'm not sure I looked. So I think we talked about it in our first one. Certainly, I've always listed, like, you can certainly sprint during Backdrop Live, but we're having a hard enough time sort of scheduling content. To say that you're doing a sprint is kind of meaningless unless you've got somebody facilitating it and managing it. And I'm not sure we have the capacity for that. If somebody stepped forward and said, hey, I really want to sprint during Backdrop Live, that's going to be my thing, then maybe we could make it work. But without that, I just don't see how it works.
I mean, offer it as an option for some of the slots.
Right, but what do we need to make a sprint successful during some of the slots? I think we need a facilitator of it. So if we have a facilitator, I'm happy to schedule some slots for sprinting. But to me, we got to first have a facilitator, somebody willing to coordinate it.
Okay.
How long would a sprint take? Is that taking up a 3 hour slot? 3 slots?
Look, if there's enough facilitators, as Tim said, I don't want to limit it. Like, people can come and go as they please, or they can take breaks. So long as there's enough people around to do reviews, or, to do discussions and brainstorming on solving issues, that could work.
When we sprint on things at camps or events, Sarvashri, it's kind of a drop in and drop out thing. So we would just open up some space and have a facilitator there. And basically, it just means that if you want to help contribute to Backdrop, work on code, you can come during that time period and somebody's there to sort of help you and direct
Okay.
you. But there's no schedule, it doesn't have to be scheduled.
So it's like a birds of a feather thing.
Well, it's even less structured than that because, but yes, it's totally unstructured. So,
Okay.
and it doesn't have to conflict with our schedule at all. We can just open up a third room and say, here's a room to sprint in. The problem is I don't want to open up a room and say, here's a room to sprint in if people are going to show up and there's nobody there to help them. That's not helpful.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay. So to reiterate, we've settled on an hour later, adding a block. Is there anything else about the schedule? Okay. The other things that came up, yes, we can start, encouraging people. We need to figure out the mechanism by which we want people to submit sessions. And I don't think if people have ideas, they can say them now, but we don't have to decide that this minute. That's one thing we want to work on. The idea of sprints, Gregory, I think we should leave it out there, but it's dependent on getting somebody that really wants to. I don't have the bandwidth to manage sprints during.
Yep, sure, understandable.
Okay. Anything else about the schedule? Okay. Well, I think one of the things that I'm going to keep repeating at every meeting is that what I really like is for somebody like a scheduling coordinator from Europe or from Asia, somebody that can take over responsibility to help, first of all, to be there during the event, during those time slots, but also to be able to sort of communicate and promote getting more presenters during those time slots. So, and I think it's better if it's somebody from those time slots and not me trying to do it.
I'm going to be in quarantine in Australia during that time. So I'm going to be in Australia time zone.
Okay. Well, we're getting towards the end of the meeting. I think we've made big progress here today. So I'd be happy to, is there anything else regarding Backdrop Live that people feel like we can decide today or should talk about?
Oh, just if we're ready registration wise and payment wise.
So Pono, I think, is still here. And one of the things Pono is going to be helping us is figure out how to do our payment, set up a payment gateway so that we can accept registration, which is really, and to be clear, I think our plan is as for the last two, that we're asking for a suggested donation. There is technically no registration fee. It's a suggested donation to participate.
I like that.
And one of the holdups has been figuring out a payment gateway with the Software Freedom Conservancy. So Pono will hopefully be able to help us with that.
How much, just out of curiosity, how much did we manage to get her from donations last time? More or less?
I forgot.
Okay.
I want to say it was over $1,000, I think, for the first Backdrop Live. I don't remember for the Backdrop Live 2.
No, this is good for covering expenses. It's nice.
Well, yeah, exactly. For general expenses. Our expenses for Backdrop Live were pretty minimal. So, almost all of that money went.
No, I mean running expenses, yes.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. Yep. It's not a huge amount, but it's probably more than we've raised in any other way recently. So.
Yep, agree.
Okay. Anything else on the outreach agenda today?
Well, with regards to social media or the content of the newsletter, and because I missed a few of the previous meetings, what about with regards to announcements from the PMC, core contributors, things like that?
I'm sorry, what about these announcements?
Oh, do we need to, I don't know where we are with that, first of all.
So in terms of outreach, I personally feel like we need to be well, that the PMC needs to be doing a better job of communicating what it's doing. That is something we're working on. In the past, it's partly been because the PMC's been fairly inactive. However, we did have a meeting about a month ago, and I think we should do some sort of a public update on what the PMC is doing. But that really requires somebody from the PMC, doing that. So we're the PMC is trying to schedule another meeting now, and I think at that meeting we need to, one of my goals will be to come up with a better strategy for that, or how we're going to communicate what's going on.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, I'm still sharing my screen.
I have this idea about differentiation.
Well, we could talk about that for a few minutes. Did you have some specific?
Just the idea of outreach. We have on the website, who Backdrop is for, who it will benefit the most. But some of the features of Backdrop are not available in things like WordPress. And so it'd be nice to emphasize those differentiating points.
Mm-hmm.
That people can do more with Backdrop without programming knowledge than they can with some of the other CMSs. And that could be very empowering to a lot of people. So I don't know how we can promote that, but I think it would be a good thing to do. And you may know more than I do about what those things are, that it really should be emphasized more. Any ideas on that from anybody?
Well, I think, first of all, it's, to me, like differentiating it makes sense. The question is where and how. And I think one of the things we've been putting a lot of work into is figuring out what our channels are and what to communicate. I think there has been some discussion before about like a comparison chart of Backdrop to Joomla, Drupal, WordPress. But I don't know where that's at. I think that largely just would need somebody to put the work into it. And on a related topic, one of the things we talked about with Pono earlier today is that we have been making an effort to get a Google AdWords grant so that we could do advertising on Google AdWords. If we did do Google advertising on Google AdWords, I think your point, Sarvashri, would be important. It's like, how is Backdrop different from the other competitors? And certainly if we had that kind of a platform, that would be really helpful. A lot of our current marketing is internal to people, that already sort of see some value in Backdrop. We don't have a lot of outreach where we're reaching out into other communities right now, and we should, but how do we do that?
I like the idea of a spreadsheet that shows comparisons. I think that would be really great. So if we start with the what do we want to communicate, then we can follow up with where we're going to push that information.
Well, I don't have immediate thoughts or ideas now for what you're suggesting, Sarvashri, but two very related topics is one, we have the section with the features, which briefly sort of like outline specific features. And we decided that we want to elaborate more on those, like have them linked to pages where they explain a little bit more than having, those just 1 to 2 line, sentences explaining what those features are. And then the other one was similar to what they've done in Drupal.org, have personas of people, like, for the website owner, for the developer, for the content editor, and then outline benefits for each sort of like category of these personas.
So with the feature list, not only what the feature is, but why it's important.
Yes.
How it empowers the person. That would be a really good thing to include to make it complete. So that people say, oh, it has this feature. Well, so what? You know, what does it do for me? You know, what does that feature do for me that these others don't do? That would be important.
Yeah.
Could make a note of those two things, you know, what we want to feature and why that feature is important.
Yeah, the current
comparison chart. At
the
least
current,
start there.
the current format is that we outline those features and then we have one or two, you know, catchphrases for each one of them instead of, you know, we're explaining it.
I think Robert wants to say something.
Yeah, thanks. I suspect a lot of people would be making their decisions or thinking more in terms of head-to-head comparison, either or. So if one has a spreadsheet, then each cell of the spreadsheet kind of has to be pretty terse. But it'd be nice maybe to have a comparison of Backdrop versus WordPress. These are the differences. Backdrop versus Drupal 8.9. These are the differences. Joomla and so forth, rather than in a chart as a series of head-to-head comparisons. Because I suspect a lot of people in their decision process make their decision that way.
Because it could be a feature and then you could check off what CMS has that feature, which one does not have it. So that people at a glance can see, oh, this has all these features and this one doesn't have so many features. So maybe this one's better and maybe this one's easier to use as well.
Yeah, although a lot of these issues are difficult to reduce to just checkboxes or simple descriptions. Example being content with fields, for example. You know, I think that's one of the great strengths of Backdrop and Drupal. WordPress has it, but you need to use a commercial plugin like Custom Fields or one of the others, and then pay $50 a year or whatever the going rate is for those. And so they both have them, they'd both be checked, but with a few more words, you could, in a head-to-head comparison, you could explain the differences a little more clearly.
Yeah, you could say included or included as a paid plugin or something only, and that would differentiate them. Anyway, some way to put those out there and differentiate how Backdrop is offering more out of the box.
Okay, sure. We need to wrap this meeting up, and I want to do two things really fast, one of which is Sarvashri mentioned earlier something that he and I were working on. We started for the last 2 weeks meeting, and I've been just sort of walking through with Sarvashri how to build a site from scratch. And we've decided to take the idea of a farmer's market and build a simple farmer's market site, partly because that's what the Drupal 8 user guide does. Although I'm not sure how helpful that will be to us, but it can't hurt. And anyways, and we're trying to record some of that, and hopefully we can share the content we're creating from that, and it'll be a really good introductory sort of thing. I view our sessions as somewhat experimental, where we're just sort of trying this on the fly. I haven't, so far I haven't like prepared a curriculum in advance. Sarvashri and I just sort of sit down and start doing the work live. But hopefully we may be able to get a little more organized as we go. And I may make that, at some point, Sarvashri, maybe we can invite other people to participate, but it's really targeted at beginners, folks who are like really new to Backdrop. So that's one thing. The other thing is just, again, I want to acknowledge that Pono is still with us, I think. And Pono, did you want to say anything to the group or say hello again, or if you're still there?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to listen and get familiar. I'm looking forward to helping out with the event as best I can. So yeah,
good.
Not much to add.
Well, we've already invited Pono or somebody from the Software Freedom Conservancy to do something during the next Backdrop Live. I think we should wrap up this meeting. Any last urgent announcements for this one before we move on to the dev meeting? Okay, I'm gonna bye everyone.